So today I figured I'd start a new series on my channel called Can You Reconcile the Bible and Science? Or I figured that title is actually kind of long, so let's just call it Science and the Bible. Where, if you didn't guess, we'll try to reconcile contradictions between science and the Bible. Of course, science being science as I am recording this because, what we know is always changing. And whether we like to admit it or not, there are contradictions between the two, right? They overlap, they contradict one another in numerous ways, and the Bible even contradicts itself in a lot of ways. Whether we like to admit it or not, it's just what happens. And so this series will be about that, about those contradictions, and whether or not you, as a Christian or whoever, can walk this fine line of pacifying, believing in science, and believing in God, or the Bible rather. And in this first episode, we'll tackle cosmology and the Earth. Now, in a different life, I actually was a Christian who also valued science, although I sort of did it one step at a time, right? But overall, I tried sort of walking this fine line of believing in science and believing in God and trying to reconcile the contradictions, but there came to a point where it just can't be reconciled anymore. And when you look at the sort of intention of the writers of each book in the Bible, right, they don't really line up with your interpretation. So you're disregarding the intention of the writer. But of course, Christians, theists, they assume that the Bible is divinely inspired and cannot be wrong. So what they do, and what I used to do, is I would take something in the Bible, right, and if it contradicts what is popularly known in science, I'd stick with the Bible. Even though there's no evidence, I'm like, oh, since this is divinely inspired, I gotta stick with this, right? So that kind of mentality, I'm sure a lot of people a lot of atheists who were, religious at some point can relate to this, right? So in this episode, we'll tackle cosmology and the Earth. So why don't we start with the beginning of the universe? And immediately we run into a problem because the first page, the first chapter, the first verse, there is already a contradiction. Genesis 1:1 states, "In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth." We've already run into a problem here because it implies that the heavens and the earth were created at the same time. We now know, of course, that the universe has been in existence for 13.8 billion years, and there are numerous ways to calculate this. And as for the Earth, it's only been existing for a measly 4.5 billion years. So the Genesis story, or the creation story, is where a lot of Christians root their, cosmology ideas, or where they fit their cosmology ideas. So let's go with that. And now a lot of people may say, oh, when God said, "Let there be light," that was actually the spark. That was the Big Bang. And by the way, to all you people who are unfamiliar with the Big Bang, the Big Bang is actually not an explosion. It's an expansion. So instead of a boom, it was pretty silent. So I guess boom isn't even the right word, or bang isn't even the right sort of word to call it. So when I go around online and I see Christians who try to who defend the theory of sort of divine intervention, or what's it called, or intelligent design, by saying, how could an explosion create life? Well, no, it didn't. It was an expansion, and it took billions of years before life even emerged. So please, when you're trying to debunk something, at least learn about it. Anyway, I just went on a tangent there. I'm sorry. And also, a key note here is that when God said, "Let there be light," the earth was already in existence. And of course, now we know that the earth was not in existence when the Big Bang happened. So yeah, that was one of the first sort of ways to pacify the sort of the Bible and the Big Bang theory, saying, oh, the "Let there be light" statement was actually the start of all of it. When all of that, the whole Big Bang and the Earth forming all happened in one day. Well, it didn't. Now I know you may say, oh, each day could represent, different periods in the formation of the universe. But one, you have to assume that the Bible is divinely inspired, which is very hard to do. But when you're a Christian trying to pacify these things, I guess it's already a foregone conclusion that it is divine. Secondly, of course, you're ignoring the intention of whoever wrote this, right? I mean, no one in the first century, sorry, no one in the 500th century BCE, which was when this was written, no one during that time thought that this was an allegory or some sort of parable. It was all considered literal, right? Jesus or ancient Jews, they all believed this stuff. I mean, there were many creation myths, let's be real, but yeah, they all believed in the creation, in the literal creation story. So their cosmology ideas did line up with the literal Genesis interpretation. So for us modern people to assume that this was an allegory is kind of ignoring the author's purpose here, in favor of assuming that this was all some divine revelation of how the world came to be. We're trying to suit, we're changing the author's purpose to suit with our own personal interpretations. Also, Psalm 74 references or mentions rather Leviathan, a giant sea monster that had to be defeated before creation. So I'm just going to leave that there. Genesis 1 verse 16, and God made two great lights, one for night and day. He also made the stars. And of course, this implies that there were two sources of light, one for day and one for night. It implies that both are sources of light. We now know that the moon actually does not emit its own light, rather it reflects light from the sun. This little diagram should illustrate that. You don't need a diagram actually, it's pretty self-explanatory. Oh, and also I kind of forgot to mention, it separates stars from the sun, when now we know that the sun is just a giant star. And now we get to the earth. Now if you remember, it was a huge meme, flat eartheners, or people who believe the earth is flat, are back, and most of them, or pretty much all of them, are Bible believing Christians basically. I don't know why I had to specify Bible believing, but they're technically not wrong. I mean, they're wrong in sort of how the earth is, but they're not wrong if they believe the Bible, because the earth is actually implied to be flat in the Bible. Job chapter 38 verse 4 to 5, that's a strong one. Isaiah 40 verse 22, although to be fair, that one may actually imply the opposite. It could actually imply a round earth. But despite this, people who wrote the Bible all believed the earth was flat. Well, you might be like, how do I know this? Well, people in ancient times, every one of them believed the earth was flat, a flat disc floating on the water, similar to, I guess, Babylonian maps. Genesis, the book of Genesis, was actually not written by Moses, and it was written around 500 BCE, the Babylonian exile. If ancient Jews knew that the earth was round, and the Bible implied it, why was Galileo persecuted for being against the geocentric theory, right? Even if the Bible was not a flat earth book, people who wrote it were of the belief that the earth was flat. So if you excuse flat earth verses, the writer's intention and belief is to be ignored then, assuming the Bible is divinely inspired, of course. But if that's the case, why all these contradictions in cosmology? Can any contradiction be resolved? Well, my answer to that is yeah, any contradiction can be resolved if you look hard enough. Bart Ehrman once said in a sermon, I'll try to find it, but Bart Ehrman once said in a sermon, this is actually in relation to sort of scriptural contradictions, like contradictions in the Bible, right? Any contradiction in the Bible is reconcilable if you go hard enough, right? If you persevere hard enough. But at the expense, you're ignoring the writer's intention, you're ignoring historical context, and you're ignoring what the writers believed. So if you're a Christian looking at the Bible and you're trying to pacify science and the Bible, well, it's a task, I have to admit, and I admire the enthusiasm and effort that people sort of do in order for them to pacify their beliefs with reality and align them. But it's a hard task, and maybe you should reevaluate then. If such contradictions are a thing, is the book really divinely inspired? Because let's face it, even if you believe in God, even if you believe in the Bible, You can't deny that there are numerous contradictions to it. But that's completely fine. It's just that you can't claim that the book is infallible. But anyways, that's pretty much it. This may not be the best this may not be the most well-made video about cosmology. I could have probably done better. But I'm studying for an exam right now, so I don't really have much time. I just wanted to release a video. This is the first part in a new series I'll be doing. So if you like, I don't know, trying to pacify science and the Bible, or at least talking about those kinds of arguments, then let me know. The next one will be about evolution, so that should be a good one. That's my specialty. And I'm working on a video about sort of other arguments for the existence of God in my other series. So stay tuned for that, I guess.